Guten Abend und herzlich willkommen im Literaturhaus hier im Raum und herzlich willkommen natürlich auch im virtuellen Literaturhaus, im Stream. Ich freue mich sehr, dass Ida Lødemel Tvedt heute Abend da ist. Herzlich willkommen. Und ich freue mich sehr, dass Mikael Krogerus den Abend moderieren wird und dass Ariela Sabacher die deutschen Passagen lesen wird. Mein Name ist Gesa Schneider, ich bin die Leiterin des Literaturhauses. Und es ist wirklich toll, dass Sie alle da sind und es ist toll, dass Ida heute da ist. Und wir werden über ihre Essaysammlung Tiefseetauchen sprechen. Sie ist dieses Jahr im Kommode Verlag erschienen und aus dem Norwegischen übersetzt worden von Karoline Hippe. An dieser Stelle möchte ich mich auch ganz herzlich bei Anne Beger, der Verlegerin, bedanken dafür, dass sie dieses Buch in ihrem Verlag hat. Dank ihr konnte ich es überhaupt erst entdecken. Und ich finde, dass es ganz wunderbare literarische Essays sind, die immer wieder vom Persönlichen zum Allgemeinen changieren, von der eigenen Erfahrung zur Leseerfahrung, von der Hochkultur zur Popkultur, von Simone Weil oder Anne Carson zu Dolly Parton. Sie sind assoziativ und präzise. Sie behandeln Themen wie Kindheit und Heimat, Repräsentation oder Körperlichkeit. Zu lesen ist eine faszinierende Analyse der Gegenwart und ein Spiel mit dem Genre und der Sprache des Essays. Das Gespräch findet auf Englisch statt. Ich spreche jetzt noch Deutsch und vielleicht auch ein bisschen auf Norwegisch. Mikael Krogerus ist Redaktor des Magazins des Tagesanzeigers. Er ist auch Moderator, er ist Autor. Hier bei uns im Haus hat er unter anderem Rachel Cusk moderiert. Er ist Finne, seine Muttersprache aber ist Schwedisch. So. Und Ariela Sabacher ist Schauspielerin und Autorin. Sie liest häufig bei uns im Haus, unter anderem Autorinnen wie Delphine de Vigan oder Rebecca Solnit hat sie ihre Stimme gegeben. Ihr Debütroman Der Sommer im Garten meiner Mutter ist letztes Jahr erschienen. Sie haben die Möglichkeit, im Live-Feed Fragen zu stellen oder auch hier im Saal im Anschluss, wenn uns noch etwas Zeit bleibt. Und jetzt übergebe ich das Wort und die Bühne an Sie.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich möchte auch noch ganz kurz was auf Deutsch sagen. Und zwar bin ich einfach wahnsinnig froh, heute hier sein zu können. Ich habe ein totales Glücksgefühl, wieder unter Menschen zu sein und mit Menschen. Und ich habe das Gefühl, egal was ab jetzt passiert, es wird einer der schönsten Abende meines bisherigen Jahres sein. Aber die Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass es auch interessant wird, ist recht hoch. Denn neben mir sitzt eben Ida Lødemel Tvedt. Sie ist eine brillante Autorin und Essayistin und hat eben dieses Buch geschrieben, Tiefseetauchen. Und wie Sie gerade schon gehört haben von Gesa Schneider, ist es gar nicht so einfach zu beschreiben, worum es da eigentlich geht. Es ist eine essayistische Reise und sie ist brillant übersetzt worden von Karoline Hippe. Ich weiß nicht, ob jemand von Ihnen auch Norwegisch spricht. Die von denen, die es tun, wissen, dass es eine Sprache ist, die sehr verwandt ist dem Deutschen, eigentlich sehr ähnlich. Und doch gibt es im Norwegischen so eine bestimmte Tonfarbe, einen bestimmten Klang, die fast keine Entsprechung hat im Deutschen. Und irgendwie ist es dieser Karoline Hippe gelungen, genau das aber zu fassen. Und allein deswegen ist es ein Meisterwerk. Das Buch an sich ist natürlich auch sehr gut, das sollten Sie natürlich auch lesen. Und es ist, wie gesagt, eine essayistische Reise in 43 Kapiteln. Und als Lesender ist man so ein bisschen dabei auf der Reise und hat dabei das Privileg, dieser Frau beim Denken zuzusehen. Und die ersten so 20, 30 Seiten hat man wirklich keine Ahnung, wo die Reise hinführt. Man kann ganz schwer sagen, worum es eigentlich geht in dem Buch. Und ein Freund von mir hat es aber kürzlich sehr gut gefasst. Er hat mir gesagt, dieses Buch zu lesen ist ein bisschen wie den Wolken am Himmel zuzuschauen. Sie hängen irgendwie zusammen, es ergibt alles einen Sinn, aber welchen, der erschließt sich uns nicht. So. Jetzt geht's los. Welcome to Zurich.
Thank
Ida.
you, Mikael. It's fantastic to be here. It feels miraculous to be here, somehow having made it here. And it feels a bit like I'm on moral thin ice for traveling, but I'm very happy to be here.
Very good. I was just praising your book. How do you feel about praise and compliments? Do you like them or do you feel embarrassed about them?
It depends on the circumstances. Right now it was easy because, shamefully enough, my German isn't very good. So that was okay, and I'm glad you liked the book.
I did very much, and Before we start talking about your book, I would like to play a little psychological game.
Okay.
And it's a game I learned from my mother, who's a therapist, and she once told me that if you want to get to know a person, you should not have them talk about themselves, but rather about something they care about.
Okay, and in that way you're going to have me analyzed in an hour.
Yeah, 15 minutes.
I hope I'm a tougher nut to crack than that.
It's so this game that my mother suggested is called Person, Place, Book.
All right.
You have the person or the patient talk about a person, a place, and a book that they care about.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do now.
Okay.
So Ida, who is your person?
I will make it a fantasy person in a way. That's I've had this thought lately that strangers are the love of my life, and if I could make kind of a collective of all the strangers that I meet. Like the work I'm doing now is very reportagey. So before Corona, I traveled around by myself, and I had this. I became more aware of something I've always known but not thought properly about. Is that when you go around the world alone in a certain kind of open mode, then you meet this person, the stranger, who makes life very convenient and fun and opens doors for you. And just today, like just the last couple of days here in Switzerland, I've met that stranger many times. Today I met a couple on the street. The other day I met a Mr. Eduardo who helped me with some research for my next book in a way that opened up a lot of possibilities. So I would say strangers. The Stranger, but that sounds like a title by Camus, but not as pompous. I don't mean it as pompous.
Do you like strangers because you don't have to meet them again?
I know because I tend to meet them again, but I like when they're still strangers.
Let's not get any deeper there.
All right.
What's your place?
A mountain in the village that my family comes from, Helgehornet. It is not a very tall mountain, but it's between kind of Alp-like mountains, very rugged, but going straight up from the fjords. Very dramatic landscape. And Helgehornet is this kind of this 2-hour little walk from the house that I'm in when I'm there, and it's a very soft mountain, so you can run really fast even downhill, because if you fall, it doesn't matter. It's this mushy, beautiful place.
Is this where you grew up?
No, I grew up in Bergen. I have a mountain that I love almost as much there. But this is where I hope to die instead. I say in this book that I'm going to die in Bergen. I've changed my mind.
And the last question, what's your book?
Oh, my book. Can I say a movie instead that opened up the world of books for me? Because that I've also thought about lately. There was a movie that I've read later that it got kind of mixed reviews. I'm not sure. Maybe it was very bad, and I can never watch it again because my heart might break. There was a movie that came out, I think, in '96, I would have been 6-7 years old or something, and it came out on VHS a couple of years later, maybe a year later, and I bought it at a little kiosk right by the apartment that my father had gotten because he just got divorced. And it was a kiosk that sold tobacco and toys and newspapers. And I bought the filmatization of Romeo and Juliet by, what's his name?
Oh, with DiCaprio?
Yeah, with Baz Luhrmann, which might be a shitty movie. But in that movie I found it was an introduction to, these great things that you kind of know are great, and then you remember discovering it as a child even, and nobody had really told you that it was great. And Shakespeare is like, it's so obvious, but it felt, my parents were kind of ex-Marxist, and I think they would think that my Shakespeare thing was a bit bougie maybe. But so it was the movie that introduced me to language as rhythm. I became obsessed with memorizing the lines. I found a flow in language through that movie, and it was where there was my favorite song on the album. I later found out was Prince. And then Leonardo DiCaprio, I still think is the best Hollywood male actor in that genre, So it was, and it was that kind of, it was set on this kind of sexy beach. It was contemporary. The costumes were very 90s and wild, and so that one. it had meant a lot for my reading, I think, that movie.
So you started reading Shakespeare after that?
Yeah, I memorized them mostly from the movie and wrote it down. So probably not very well, probably not perfectly. And it took a while before I read Shakespeare in a way that made sense to me. But it was there from that moment, starting to memorize the lines, I guess, began something that would later return as reading.
Let's move on to your book.
Okay. Did you figure me out yet?
We get back to that.
Okay.
It has the Norwegian title Marianne-gruppen, which is it in English the Mariana?
The Mariana Trench.
Mariana Trench, which is the deepest place on Earth, and we know very little about that place, actually. And the German title is Tiefseetauchen, so deep sea diving. But the German edition has this very funny image on the cover, which is a fishing hook in a water glass. So what comes to your mind if you see this?
I think it's a brilliant illustration. I think it's kind of what an essay does when it's good, right? It takes something concrete and mundane, and it tries to kind of fish up the whole ocean from it. So when I called it the Mariana Trench, first of all, I wanted a title that didn't really interrupt on the reading so much. So it's kind of abstract and loose. It doesn't say that much, and it points to something that has to do with something maritime and some idea of depth. And for me, that idea of depth in the book is, I guess, there's a little bit of an ironic distance to it too, because I mean, I hope it's not read as if I think I'm a deep person or anything. It's more like that kind of the desire to find everything in a glass of water or whatever, and also it kind of to drill down into what seemingly cannot be drilled down to. I think is a part of what good literary essays do when they work.
But it's also, it reminded me of this Scandinavian word of navelpilleri.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is in English. So if you...
Well, navel gazing is...
Navel gazing, if you search for something inside yourself that's not there. So you go deep sea fishing in a glass of water.
Yeah, and navel gazing, since the dawn of the essay genre, there's kind of four main accusations that people make against these kinds of essays. One, it's that it's too much name dropping, it's elitist, all of that. Another one is like it's too much anecdotal evidence. It's not a rational argument for anything. You're just looking at this one example and building from there, which I think is part of the beauty. And then the last thing is, I guess there's two more things, but to your point, narcissism, right? The narcissism of the essayistic eye, which is a tension that I'm really interested in, and that I'm still working a lot on figuring out what to do with, because of course there is an element of navel gazing when you use yourself as kind of the example of what it is to experience. So that kind of narcissism is there as a potential something a mistake you can very easily make. So one of the things I'm exploring with the book is that the space of the essayistic eye, what it can do, what it can't do. When is it obnoxious? How far into that can you pull it? How far are you, and how much can you do with that kind of ironic distance to yourself? Because if you identify like 100% with the eye in the essays, probably going to read more like a memoir, right? Which is often a story about somebody having had some exceptional painful experience, and now they're going to tell you about it. That's usually not a good place for an essay. It has to have more of a distance to the eye, I think. Which is still honest. You're not being fake, but you're looking at yourself a little bit from the side and seeing how you can kind of play with that eye.
Let's take a look at an example for this kind of essayistic writing that you do, and maybe we should just start off with the first chapter. And why don't you read first in Norwegian, a little part, and then I
read in German?
Yeah, then you read in German.
Yeah. So I can say one thing is that, well, here, one of the points of the first essay then is not to be an I, but a we. So it starts in a kind of a collective, like epics, like tragedies begin with a choir, and the book starts there too with the kind of choir of children who are very intellectually hungry, bordering on pretentiousness, I would say. Okay. One more thing I have to say is that I've heard from everybody that Swiss people really like hearing people speak in languages that they don't know, which I find a very healthy sign for your culture. I think in Norway, if you had some Dutch writer come and read to you in Dutch, everybody would just be waiting for it to, yeah, or just thinking it was a mistake. But I'm going to do it because I've been asked to do it. Okay. Å ha vært barn er som å ha vært full på en fest der de andre var edru. Vi vet at vi var der, at vi var hemningsløse og oppmerksomhetssyke, men husker kun bruddstykker og stillbilder. Bare de sobre voksne har tilgang på de vi var den gangen, hva vi gjorde og hvordan vi uttrykket oss. Kanskje det er derfor vi resten av livet hjemsøkes av en slags eksistensiell fylleangst. Og kanskje det er derfor vi ikke er helt stø på foten når vi senere gir oss ut for å være voksne, drikker kaffe og greier, Calvados, får samboere og jobber og går på veldig voksne smeller og begynner å gjenfortelle barndommen i lys av stadig nye håp og stadig nye skuffelser. My voice is better in my own language. I don't get as hectic. I'm going to try that.
Schleppnetz. Kind gewesen zu sein, ist wie auf einer Party voller nüchterner Menschen als einzige getrunken zu haben. Wir wissen, dass wir dort gewesen sind, dass wir hemmungslos waren und im Mittelpunkt stehen wollten, erinnern uns aber lediglich an Bruchstücke und Standbilder. Nur die nüchternen Erwachsenen, die uns als Kind erlebt haben, können sich ganz klar daran erinnern, wer wir damals gewesen sind, was wir gemacht haben, wie wir uns ausgedrückt haben. Vielleicht werden wir deshalb bis ans Ende unseres Lebens von einer existenziellen Katerparanoia verfolgt. Wahrscheinlich stehen wir auch deshalb nie vollkommen sicher auf beiden Beinen, wenn wir uns später als Erwachsene ausgeben. Wir trinken Kaffee und Calvados, ziehen mit unseren Lebenspartnern zusammen, haben Jobs und tappen in die folgenschweren Fallen der Erwachsenen. Und im Lichte dieser neuen Hoffnungen und Enttäuschungen beginnen wir, aus unserer Kindheit zu erzählen. Wir besuchen das Viertel, in dem wir aufgewachsen sind. Wir gehen zwischen den Reihenhäusern im Stadtviertel Melkeplassen spazieren, nehmen den Trampelpfad, der zum Løvstakken führt, einem der 7 Gipfel, von denen aus man auf Bergen hinunterschauen kann, auf die Insel Askøy, das Gullfjellet, den Flughafen und lassen den Blick über die Hochebene Widden schweifen, mit Gangsterrap auf den Ohren und fremdsprachigen Gedichtbänden in der Jackentasche. Wir gehen am Supermarkt vorbei und an der Schule, an den Kränen und Containern und an dem Wohnblock, vor dem wir immer Süßigkeiten von dem beschränkten Pädo bekommen haben, vor dem wir überhaupt keine Angst hatten. Wir waren schneller und schlauer als er. Am Fuße unseres Viertels liegt der Puddefjord, schwer und still wie eine abgekappte Walzunge. Die weißen Holzhäuser im Stadtviertel Damsgø färben sich blau in der Dämmerung, das Licht in den Stuben wird wärmer, oranger, der wehmütige Kontrast zwischen drinnen und draußen wird deutlicher. Die reine Winterkälte riecht nach Fäulnis, Kamin und Kjötboller. Im Sandkasten auf dem Spielplatz sitzen 3 Kinder, so wie wir einst dort gesessen haben, bloß dass unsere Regensachen steifer und geschlechtsneutraler waren. Wir meinen, uns noch genau daran erinnern zu können, wie es sich anfühlte, dort zu sitzen, in so einem kleinen Körper, in Ölzeug, mit einem Riemen unter den Gummistiefeln befestigt. Wir trugen Mützen mit Ohrenklappen, die mit nassen Schleifen unter unserem Kinn festgezurrt worden waren. Fürsorgliche Erwachsene hatten versucht, uns zu versiegeln, die wir dort saßen und buddelten, mit Sand in den Schürfwunden, Sand zwischen den Milchzähnen und Modder unter den Fingernägeln. In der Erde rund um unsere Grundschule suchten wir nach Überresten des Krieges, fanden Sprengkabel in der Böschung, Patronenhülsen vom Schießplatz und träumten davon, weiter zu graben, vorbei an Ruinen, Fossilien, Reliquien aus der Zeit der Wikinger, durch den Erdkern bis nach China. Wir haben Krieg gespielt, Mutter, Vater, Kind, Panzer, Räuber und Jagdflieger. Wir waren Bergenser, aber wenn wir spielten, imitierten wir den generischen Oslo-Dialekt, den wir aus dem Fernsehen kannten. Wir ließen unsere Stimmen extra kindisch klingen, als würden wir nur so tun, als wären wir Kinder. Wenn ich groß bin, dachte eine von uns, werde ich Entdeckungsreisende. Ich werde im Dschungel in einem Safari-Zelt sitzen, in Khaki-Hose und weißem Hemd, werde mit einer Pfauenfeder Briefe schreiben an einem Mahagonitischchen, das von Sklavenrücken getragen wird. Ohne zu wissen, woher solche Fantasien stammten, stellten sie sich vor, wie sie davon segelte, allein, androgyn, kühn den Fluss hinab in alle dunklen Herzen. Das Boot auf dem Spielplatz wurde zum Piratenschiff erklärt. Wir machten uns auf, segelten über den Atlantik, hinter uns das schäumende Kielwasser, auf unseren Lippen der salzige Geschmack eroberter Männer. Wir konnten nie so genau sagen, was wir eigentlich haben wollten, und vielleicht würden wir niemals verstehen, worum es eigentlich ging, dieser Heißhunger auf Süßes, der in uns rumorte, diese Gier danach, uns tief in die Erde und bis auf die andere Seite zu bohren, in etwas anderes hinein. Wir wollten die Welt verspeisen, Rollen verspeisen, alles sein, uns aus Nischen herausschleimen, neue Leben beginnen, wieder und wieder, vor allen fliehen, die uns kannten, unter Sentimentalisten leben, unter Amateuren und Lügenbaronen, wollten alle Aufgaben enthusiastisch angehen und nur halbe Sachen machen, nie zu lang. Die Welt von Berggipfeln betrachten und durch Lupen aufsaugen, aufgesaugt werden, uns an Bildern laben, an Menschen, an Erzählungen und Dingen. Wollten mit einem vielfältigen Ich operieren, das immer wieder von Neuem hochgefahren wird, zurechtgerückt von einem Satz, einem Treffen, einem Kleidungsstück, das ausgeschaltet, angeschaltet, ausgeschaltet, in einem anderen Raum angeschaltet wird, unter anderen Menschen, mit anderen Meinungen und anderen Neigungen. Jedes Mal anders.
Thank you very much. So here we have a description of a Norwegian youth and the way of the world seen through the eyes of a child. And this is one of the big metaphors you use in that opening essay. I think it's by Sigmund Freud, the so-called oceanic feeling, the feeling that everything is about myself and the whole world is just myself. But I think you have a certain take on that feeling. Can you describe that? You use it a little bit in that essay.
Yeah, well, it's also the feeling of everything being connected, right? So, and he connects it to an infantile feeling, and I guess I'm trying to see both the ridiculous parts of it and also the very beautiful and moving parts of it, and what one of the things I'm trying to describe is this in this chapter is this. Very earnest impulse, very earnest desire to kind of swallow everything, to eat the world, to learn, and to through reading become. You know, I think that both reading and writing has in it that kind of will to power. You know, you when you're writing, you're being a bit of a bully. You're building the world in your image, and there's something also moving in that impulse that drives, that catalyzes people forward into ideas. And then I guess also I'm playing with the kind of the how when taken to the extreme and into an adult world, it all kind of falls apart, because where these people, where that impulse that they have begin, if it's taken to its extreme, it ends up in a world of ideas that doesn't see the concrete anymore, that doesn't see the world and doesn't have anything to hold on to. So there's this risk also with the oceanic feeling, or with that ocean feeling that they have, it will also be that they can also get lost in abstraction, and which I guess I wrote this while I was kind of done with being at universities, after having been at universities for many years and feeling like feeling a disenchantment with a very kind of theory-based worldview that I'd been surrounded by for many years, and felt like that was a very impotent way to approach things. If you want, at least if you want to write well, if you want to deal with the world as you meet it, and not, you know, approach the glass of water through some kind of idea, but look at the water first, which is what an essayist do, as opposed to academic maybe.
Mm-hmm. You use this word, or you use this description of the kids playing, but then suddenly they become adults and they pretend that they are adults, but inside they're still a kid. And I think we all know that feeling when we're trying to act like an adult, and there's this beautiful Scandinavian word for that, is låtsasvuxen. So pretend to be adult.
Veslevuxen in Norwegian.
Yes, and I really like that word because I think we all know that feeling.
I have it every day still when I drink coffee. It's like, I'm drinking coffee.
I have it when I pay with my credit card. It's like, this, I can do this now. Is writing for you, do you feel adult when you write, or do you more feel like a kid when you write?
I feel very much my age when I write. I don't identify with my child self at all. I think the first chapter here is an exception. I don't think I have that. I listen to people say, you know, people who are 50 say, I feel like I'm 26 inside. I can't imagine that it will be like that for me. I hope that I will feel every age that I am. I plan to feel every age that I am. I feel very much like I'm 33 years old when I write.
What it's like to be 33?
It's fine. It's the year of Christ. It's a good time for being hanged on a cross and then resurrected or something. Isn't that what happens when you're 33? I think so.
You said earlier that you somehow structure or you build a world when you write. Do you write in order to make sense of the world, or in order to make it better than it actually is?
Both. Make sense of the world is, I guess, the kind of the desperation in the writing when I feel like I have the thing that makes me feel like this. I have to somehow build a life for myself where this is the thing that I do. That's making sense of the making sense of the world part, and then the flow and the play and the, you know, when you have all your parts and then it's then I'm making it better and more fun. And so now when I'm writing a lot about people who I meet or places that I go, and I'm trying to kind of mind them for something that I can use to say something broader, then you know, the magic of you know, when you write down the crazy coincidences that happens, and that's the thing that the essay can do that the novel can't do, right? A lot of things that happen to you in life are just so perfectly symmetrical, and the coincidence is just so magically perfect that if you put it in a novel, it would be a bad novel because it would be so unlikely. But the world is unlikely, so these unlikely things happen. And when you write that down, and I'm a sucker for a good coincidence. I love a good coincidence. So I will always make a lot out of any kind of parallel that falls into my lap, and that does kind of mystify the world more, right? In a way that doesn't, where you don't have to believe that it's anything else but a coincidence. The coincidence is beautiful enough in itself, and it does make things. It thickens the feeling of meaning, you know, with an experience.
If you start reading the first chapter and we just listen to it, it could also have been the beginning of a novel. It could have been at the beginning of a memoir. It could also have been a beginning of a non-fiction book about Norwegian childhood, but it is an essay. So explain once to me, why did you, this is a totally non-literary question, but why did you write an essay? Why didn't you write a novel or a memoir or non-fiction book?
Good question. I think I've fallen into the essay genre because it suits my temperament and my character. I want to write a novel one day, but I try, and I don't think I'm very good at it. I think I think I will do what a lot of novelists that I don't like do, is that they have some kind of cultural theory, they have some idea about, they have some opinions about something, and then they make some stick figures and they like blow ideas into them. And I think I would be that kind of novelist, and that's not the kind of novels that I like. So it's not that I think that the essay is the coolest literary genre. I don't think so. I think that the novel and the poem is, you know, the king and queen of literature and always should be. I have no need to kind of elevate the essay genre to that status, but I read more fiction than non-fiction, I don't know if that's true at the moment, so I think that the essay genre, it suits it to be a second-rate citizen of literature, and from that kind of a punky underground position, it can do some things that fiction can't do. That to me, that I think is what it fits my temperament and my way of looking at the world, and I like that. So various essayists will have different ideas about how much you're supposed to tell the truth in an essay, and I'm very conservative in that question. I've met people who write essays who just conflate times and places and they make up a character that they met, and for me it's one of the few things that offends me because I feel like that's the only thing that that separates the genre of the essay from other things, is that it's operating with some kind of pretty direct truth contract. That doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes. I've made mistakes in the book, and I know that memory distorts and everything. But you have to kind of believe that there's a difference between a lie and a mistake, and I don't think good essayists lie. So I often think that okay, the reader doesn't need to like me, but they have to trust me, because that's all I have. If I'm giving them nonfiction and I'm giving them essay writing, then if they don't believe that I'm trying to tell the truth, then it's not going to work. Like the stuff with the coincidence. If you think that I made that up, it's going to totally kick the legs from underneath it, right?
But there are parts in your book, we cannot read it right now, but there's a discussion, a weird meeting between you and alt-right, very early alt-right movement man who is, interestingly enough, very smart, highly educated, but a total asshole.
I don't think so,
yes, sure. But it felt it could have been part of a fiction. The dialogue was very smooth.
Yeah.
How do you decide how much you can change in an essay in order to make it good, and how much you can just?
Very little. I had a tape recorder in all my conversations with him, and I've probably cut some sentences and stuff and made them more. I mean, a lot of the things you say, like now, you don't write that. So, I mean, I've made it more writerly, but it has to be true to what was said, because it's this. Whenever if I wish that he would have said something else, then I'm probably avoiding some friction that is a door to something. So I think in that kind of creative nonfiction, as they call it in America, which is a okay category, then. It drives it that way that truth corrects it, and you have to adapt to things. Not like he didn't say what I wanted him to say. Okay, well then that's probably why did I want him to say that? That's probably something that I needed to have punctured somehow.
It's usually said that people or writer, while writing a work, read a book on the side that somehow influences what they're writing. What was the book that influenced you while you wrote those essays?
Not a book, not one book. I always read while I write. For me, there's no feeling, there's no difference between the two actions. I have to be in good language to feel like I'm making good language. For me, it's a lot about rhythm. Either I'm in a rhythm or I'm not in a rhythm. Either I feel like there's like a stride in my language or there's not, and I have to kind of warm up with good stuff, and it can be anything. I read in a very kind of hyperactive way, so it was definitely not one book that inspired it. Very many different things. So one of the things that I'm trying to do with the book is trying to see what happens if I think about some of the same problems from very different essayistic angles. So some of the chapters are like this one, very abstract, very very kind of modernist, I guess, and a little bit. There's some like modernist fragment stuff, which is a big discussion, right? That comes and goes. Whether like Adorno wrote about it, that the essay is always accused of being too fragmented, and that's a kind of a discussion that comes again and again. And I have a problem with some of especially in contemporary American essay writing. There's a lot of like sentimental use of the fragments where you kind of juxtapose parts and you kind of pretend that there's a connection, but you haven't done the work and there's no connection. So that's one subcategory of the essay that I'm playing with in the first chapter, and also in a chapter called Omfallskepsis. And then in other chapters, I pull the genre towards its more kind of new journalism, like the one you mentioned, or gonzo journalism, where I'm more like a reporter and engage with whatever I'm reporting on. Other parts, I'm pulling it more over towards the more argumentative, the more academic essay. So I guess I'm trying to see what happens. So that means that each chapter is probably influenced by a different branch of essayism. I was studying creative nonfiction at this American university while I was writing it. So I was doing classes and seminars and studying reading a lot from different parts of what is kind of called essays, which is a very broad and vague label.
Let's move to another chapter that is totally different.
Yeah.
And it's a chapter where you narrate a time in your life where you used to work with autistic kids.
Manchmal, wenn ich mehrere Wochenendschichten hintereinander übernahm, übernachtete ich auf einer Matratze im Spielzimmer im Keller. Es tat gut, dort zu liegen, obwohl die Matratze nach Pisse und Chlor roch und der wortkarge junge Mann im Zimmer nebenan gerade die Masturbation für sich entdeckt hatte und jedes Mal, wenn er kam, in begeistertes Lachen ausbrach. Die Institution beanspruchte alle Sinne. Durch die Flure hallten Stimmen, wortreiche wie wortlose. Es roch nach Blut, Chlor und Kotze. Getrocknete Nudelsoße klebte in meinen Haaren, die Kinder ziepten an ihnen, kratzten mich, warfen mir Exkremente ins Gesicht und bissen mir in den Arm, sodass ich zum Bereitschaftsarzt musste, der mir eine Tetanusspritze gab. Himmlisch. Die Institution bescherte mir Tage ohne Spiegel. Meine Haut wurde fettig und der Alkohol in den sterilisierenden Seifen machte meine Hände trocken und furchig wie die Hände alter Matriarchinnen. Ich sah meinen Händen dabei zu, wie sie arbeiteten, genoss, dass sie allmählich sicherer wurden, rauer, stärker. Ich wollte wie eine dieser Frauen werden, die seit Jahren dort arbeiteten, die sich niemals verschrecken ließen, sondern alle Situationen mit der gleichen, beinahe unheimlichen Seelenruhe bewältigten. Ich wollte allen, die niemanden auf dem Spektrum kennen, von dem Drama in der Einrichtung berichten. Aber das durfte man nicht. Man durfte sich nicht mit dem Unglück anderer rühmen, das Autismus-Spektrum nicht zu etwas Exotischem machen, die Einrichtung nicht mit Narrativen von den edlen Wilden kolonialisieren. Die Kinder sollten geschont werden, das war die Idee, aber es fühlte sich wie Zensur an, bei der es eher darum ging, die Gesellschaft zu schonen. Ich rebellierte hier und da, ließ die Kinder fremde Menschen nerven, wenn wir im Wald unterwegs waren, ließ sie im Bus laut aufheulen und Blumen im Nygörtspark pflücken. Jetzt hattet ihr aber Glück, dachte ich über die Passanten, deren Tag durch diese kleinen, schönen Rebellen zu etwas Besonderem gemacht wurde. Natürlich waren nicht alle Kinder und Jugendlichen stumm. Mir wurde manchmal ein kleiner Herzensbrecher um die 13 zugeteilt, der alles über Züge wusste, was es zu wissen gab, und der ganz konkret artikulieren konnte, wie frustrierend es war, mit einem Haufen jaulender Wahnsinniger in einer Entlastungseinrichtung zu wohnen. Wir fuhren oft in die Stadt, ins Naturhistorische Museum, ins Wissenszentrum und in die Kunstmuseen am Ufer des Lille Lyngegårdsvann. Manchmal ließ der Schaffner uns ins Zugführerhäuschen, wo der kleine Schlauberger mit todernster Miene vor all den Knöpfen und Schaltern stand und sie ganz genau studierte. Eines Tages, wir waren im Museumsviertel im Restaurant Lieswerke, er lief an den Malereien vorbei, die dort an der Wand hingen, und legte nur vor den Bildern, die ihm am besten gefielen, kurze Trippelpausen ein, um mir dann ganz außer Atem zu erzählen, was er in den Farben und Linien erkannte, bevor er weitereilte, zog er mich plötzlich mit einem brüllenden Lachen am Jackenärmel. Er zeigte auf ein abstraktes Kunstwerk und rief: »Guck mal!« »Was ist denn daran so lustig?« Hä? Ida, das hängt auf dem Kopf. Er lachte sich schief, schlug sich auf die Schenkel wie ein Mann in einer Kneipe, bis irgendwann nur noch ein Glucksen zu hören war, und verkündete, dass wir jetzt hier im Museum fertig wären, mit einem Ton, bei dem ich den Verdacht schöpfte, dass er die gesamte Kunstindustrie durchschaut hatte. Wir gingen hinaus an die Frühlingsluft Richtung Bahnhof. Unterwegs trafen wir einen Bekannten, der in Armeejacke, Palästinensertuch und mit zerzaustem Haar durch die Straßen streifte. Als der junge Radikale grüßend an uns vorbeigezogen war, drehte der Knabe sich mit strengem Blick zu mir um und sagte, »Aber Ida, der tut doch nur so, als wäre er arm.« Bis der Zug abfuhr, hatten wir noch etwas Zeit. Also setzten wir uns an einen der Tische vor dem Café in der Ankunftshalle. Ich kaufte mir einen Kaffee und Zeitungen, er bekam Kakao und Ritalin. Dann saßen wir schweigend da, bei einem perfekten Rendezvous, und schauten den Tauben zu, die über das Mosaik aus Kaugummifladen tapsten, in einer zugigen Ankunftshalle aus Glas, Ziegelstein und gebogenem Stahl. Ein Denkmal für Geschwindigkeit und Bewegung und altmodischen Fortschrittsoptimismus.
Thank you. So you described this, it felt a little bit like almost a religious awakening that you had while working with these kids. Can you describe what exactly happened?
At least a mystical experience. And that's one of the things I'm thinking about in the essay, because I'm struggling with this the tension between this very strong experience of being close to something, you know, godly or otherworldly, or here's like a creature that is different from me, better than me, more human than me, and like the beauty of an epileptic fit, what it can be, and all of that. So I was, on the one hand, this instinctual reaction that was part of this kind of dated romantic trope of the mad, right? That isn't that's not how we talk about it in our discourse. And so there was that on the one hand, the tension between that and these ideas of how we are supposed to think of them. And I wasn't. It's not like taking side one or the other. It's more to kind of see what happens in that tension. And in that sense, this essay is maybe the essay in the book that is where it's most obvious that this is what I feel essays are about, that kind of movement between the experience in all its concreteness and your reaction to that, and then the study, the research, the literature, the ideas, and then you're moving between them, and that, you know, like a hermeneutic parts and whole kind of thing. So it's that's the task, I think, of writing an essay. And in this one, it was a very strong bodily emotional experience. Like I think everybody who's if you work in a care home, which a lot of people do at some point in their life, at least in our, it's you get access to something that is very it opens a lot up to get access to that. And then for me, it's like, okay, how do I think about that experience without falling into the pitfalls of aestheticizing suffering. Mm-hmm. There's a long, good tradition for that in Europe that I think is kind of dumb, or a lot of it, like the kind of the elevation of madness as like access to knowledge, and which is dubious and not kind of a sustainable way to think about it. But it's a very strong experience, and it's worth kind of saving the beauty of it without too much interruption from correctness.
Mm-hmm. How come you work there?
Just to make money. I was kind of in between lives. I think I was 22 or something, 21, and I'd come back. I studied in Paris for a year, and then I was in the university in Norway, and I found it not very inspirational for a year, and I was trying to get to the US somehow. I wanted to study in the US, and I was writing applications, and I didn't get accepted where I wanted the first time around. So it ended up I worked there for 2 years and kind of plotting my escape to America while I was there.
You just mentioned that you didn't want to romanticize the mad, as it happens sometimes, but at the same time you saw something while working with these kids.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little more? What exactly did you see?
Well, it was the relationship that I described the most in the essay was this one kid who is languageless but still very communicative, and I guess what I saw was one thing I saw, which is controversial as a stance, was what I felt was the very almost uncanny similarity between people who are on the far end of the spectrum, making it right. We call it the spectrum now, and we no longer talk about autism, but we kind of have to. We can't totally forget the word, because then we forget a lot of history and a lot of understanding of autism. Like with a lot of words, it's clever to keep them on the back burner, kind of. And I guess that what I saw and what I'm trying to describe is the very peculiarity of this phenomenon in its extreme versions. And then you have the lighter end of the spectrum, which is many things, and there you get it gets messy, and then you can talk about Asperger's and all of that. But with these boys in the way they use patterns, the way they use voice without having language, the way they move their hands, the way they move their eyes, this is a lot of people have a lot of authority on this question, and I guess I'm trying to think about what does it mean if that's true, that it's such a peculiar state.
Mm-hmm. I think you write somewhere also that good essayists have to be a little weird.
I say like queer.
Queer, okay. What does that mean?
Well, I guess. Well, it means I'm playing on, of course, the androgynous idea that there's got to be like a masculine and a feminine side to it. But it's not just that. It's also or like a queering of categories, all of that stuff, which is also a bit part of a jargon that I make a little bit of fun of in the book, maybe. But it's also for me, essay writing is a way out of polemics, right? It's a way out of like the public sphere in Norway. To me, feels often, which is where I've kind of decided to write rather than I like being in that little country with the little public sphere where you can do a lot and you can move around in a way that feels very productive and energetic. But one of the things that I find suffocating sometimes is that everything feels like it's about opinion. So every statement in public is a kind of opinion about something. People identify so completely with their opinions, and then it becomes this ping-ponging of just opinions. Where so some people have now read, all the literature that criticizes woke culture, and then everybody else has written all this pro-woke, and then you have this meaningless ping-pong debate where nobody's listening to anybody, and people are just kind of wearing their opinions like jewelry, and that to me is just fantastically boring. And so for me, I think I've always felt kind of suffocated by that it was just discussion everywhere, and it felt often counterproductive to the kind of intellectual work that I find satisfying, which is maybe a little bit more withdrawn in terms of like alliances and stuff, but more engaged with the concrete and all the ways that it contradicts itself. So the essay is a kind of it queers public discourse.
Would that also mean that you could take both opinions, as you do a little bit with this? I come back to this alt-right guy, where you somehow sympathize with him, although you don't
I was very charmed by him.
Opinions.
Yeah. No, but I mean, nobody needs my opinion about things. I don't. I assume that people are in my essay, like I am. If I read anybody's text, I'm there to be with their language, to be in their head. That's what you do when you read. So in an essay, unlike in an academic paper and stuff, you can't say, as Nietzsche said, and then quote him for 4 pages. You have to kind of, if he's making a cameo in your essay, he's working for you. He's got to serve you. It's not about Nietzsche, it's about you. So that goes back to the kind of the eye of the essay being a swollen, scary entity, but so you're there to be with a voice, and then like in any kind of intimate relationship, the opinions become kind of secondary. So I think that if you want to write an op-ed, then write an op-ed. It's probably not. If you're like pregnant with a manifesto, then you're probably not pregnant with an essay on the same topic. You know, if you know what you think about something very, very clearly, I think it's the material for a different kind of genre. I think a good essay, you start off and you're a little bit scared because you don't really know what you think about it, but you feel like there's something important here, something dense with meaning, or something that has an interpretive problem in it that requires a kind of flexible engagement. So yeah, ideally for me, an essay is the opposite of a op-ed.
But why do you think our time is so obsessed with opinions?
I don't know. Probably all times have been. I don't know. Of course, you could go into the whole, social media is making us more tribalistic and things like that, which is true. But it's not a very interesting point to make. But I guess the more confused people get, the more they cling to total theories about how everything is connected. Like what the kids here in the first chapter want, they want that total theory of everything, the total cultural theory, or, like I am a Freudian, and here's how I approach everything. And of course, the more hectic and high-pitched the world gets, the more
We're stuck in this oceanic feeling.
Yeah, or the more comfort you find in a total answer.
Let's get to the last reading passage, which brings us back to your grandmother.
Oh, right.
Betreutes Wohnen. Der Winter ist bald zu Ende. Ich sitze am Küchentisch in Houve de Bugda, dem Heimatdorf meiner Großeltern, und betrachte die Landschaft, die Wälder und die Sunnmørsalpene hinter dem verfallenen Sommerstall, an dem, nach Großmutters Erzählungen, Urgroßmutter einmal gegen einen Bären gekämpft hat. Ich trinke Kaffee und Biola Trinkjoghurt, esse Haferkekse von der Bäckerei in Björkelo und denke, wie ungünstig es doch ist, dass Einsamkeit und Erschöpfung die einzigen Zustände reinen, vollkommenen Glücks sind, die ich kenne. Aber ich mache mir nichts weiter draus, denn ich weiß, dass Einsamkeit nur dann schön ist, wenn sie selbst gewählt ist, und dass ich nach einigen Wochen schon keine Lust mehr haben werde, durch den Wald zu laufen. Ich genieße die Stille, die Abwesenheit von Zeugen, kein ewiges Gedudel oder Gequatsche aus dem Radio. Ich genieße, dass ich mich nicht mit der Rastlosigkeit anderer auseinandersetzen muss, deren Bedürfnis, ständig etwas zu unternehmen. Ich habe das Haus wieder warm bekommen, obwohl es mehrere Monate leer gestanden hat. Es ist lange her, dass Großmutter ins Heim gezogen ist. Jetzt steht sie schon mit einem Bein im Reich der Toten, und es ist so ungeheuerlich, dass man sich mit jemandem unterhalten kann, der eigentlich schon im Jenseits ist. Wenn ich sie im Örsterheim besuche, sitzt sie da, die Hände in den Schoß gelegt, die Augen geschlossen, und verführt mich mit überirdischen Assoziationsketten. Sie sagt, ich habe 2 Kinder gemacht. 2 Kinder? Nein, Kinder sind nicht aus Zweigen gemacht. Sie sagt, ich habe ihm in den Schritt getreten, aber das war nicht so schlimm, denn er war nicht schwanger, und außerdem wusste er nicht, an welchem Ende das Kind rauskommen würde. Und wenn man weder Bartwuchs noch Kuhfladen hat, will man am liebsten nur mit den engsten Verwandten zusammen sein. Sie ist ein sprachlicher Tintenfisch. Jeder Tentakel hat sein eigenes Sinnesleben, reagiert auf seine Umgebung, kappt sich vom Mutterschiff ab. Jeder Sprung ist einerseits perfekt, andererseits total losgelöst von dem, was zuvor gesagt wurde und dem, was danach kommt. Sie fischt das Zwischenkriegs-Norwegen mit Leichtigkeit aus dem Wasser und stopft es der Gegenwart in den Schlund. Tintenfisch-Oma spuckt Tinte. Sie ist eine dadaistische Wortmaschine, ein intelligentes, überirdisches Wesen, tief aus dem Marianengraben. Jetzt sitze ich schon seit 2 Wochen in dieser Küche, in Großvaters langärmeligem Wollunterhemd und Omas langen Wollunterhosen, ohne groß mit jemandem zu sprechen, außer mit Großmutter und meinem Freund, der in unserer Wohnung in New York sitzt und sich seine Wunden nach einer Operation leckt. Ich habe ein bisschen schlechtes Gewissen, dass ich nicht bei ihm bin, aber nicht zu sehr. Wenn wir auf FaceTime miteinander sprechen, mache ich alle Lichter aus und drehe auch die Beleuchtung des Computers ganz runter, sodass er gar nicht hier ist und ich auch nicht. Wir treffen uns in einem Lehrraum, einem Übungsraum für die Liebe und Konflikte. Er sagt, dass sich die Welt hier auf dem Dorf klein anfühlen müsse. Falsch, sage ich. Die Welt ist hier genauso groß und genauso klein wie an anderen Orten, denn egal, wo man sich befindet, man nimmt nur so viel Platz ein, wie der Körper braucht, und man spricht ohnehin nicht mit so vielen Menschen. Es ist die Illusion, man sei in New York größer als man selbst, die diese Stadt idiotisch macht. Und die Illusion, sie sei der Mittelpunkt der Welt, macht sie peripher. Die provinziellsten Menschen, die ich je getroffen habe, waren Ur-New Yorker, die glaubten, dass sie am Nabel der Welt leben und alle Kulturen sich um sie herum vereinen, nur weil sie, wann immer sie Bock haben, die Bahn nach Flushing nehmen können, um chinesisch essen zu gehen, oder an Coney Island vorbei nach Brighton Beach, wo es auf den Straßenmärkten nur so von russischen Damen wimmelt, die ihre Haare immer noch in dem einzigen Rotton färben, der damals in Teilen der Sowjetunion verkauft wurde. Es wirkt so, als seien alle Räume und alle Zeiten in New Yorks ordentlich segregierten Stadtvierteln zusammengepuzzelt, aber das stimmt nur teilweise, denn jedes Fenster hat nur einen begrenzten Horizont und jedes Viertel ist ein sich selbst versorgendes Dorf mit seiner eigenen Wäscherei, seinem eigenen Schneider, Blumenhändler, Supermarkt, Nagelstudio, seiner eigenen Bank. Die Menschen sind an ihre Orte gebunden und orientieren sich eingeschränkt. An keinem anderen Ort habe ich so viele Leute getroffen, die sich nur widerwillig von Plätzen der Welt faszinieren lassen, für deren Verständnis ihnen noch die Grundlage fehlt. Sie weigern sich, sich verwundern zu lassen, denn sie glauben, Verwunderung sei gleichgestellt mit Hochmut. Die Erzsünden für kosmopolitische New Yorker sind Othering, kulturelle Appropriation und Exotifizierung. Sünden, die nach einem zurückgelassenen, veralteten Europa stinken. Check your privilege, rufen sie sich zu, wenn eine von ihnen erzählt, was sie auf einer Reise erlebt hat, als ob Privileg an sich ein Unding wäre, unabhängig davon, wie man dieses Privileg nutzt. Der Nachteil an der Anwendung dieser Konzepte besteht darin, dass sie eine ganze Reihe an Erfahrungen unmöglich machen und die Prinzipienreiterin verbarrikadieren, sie in ihrer Dehnbarkeit einschränken und ihr verwehren, mit dem Fremden zu spielen. Hier in Hovedebygda hat man immerhin Verständnis dafür, dass an anderen Orten der Welt Großes vor sich geht, das man nicht versteht, erkläre ich dem Mann im Computer mit moralisierendem und heimatromantisierendem Ton. Ich übertreibe, behaupte, dass es auch hier im guten alten Dorf eine Menge an Kosmopoliten und Armchair-Travelers gebe. Darum wird es sich für mich nicht so anfühlen, an den Ort des Geschehens zurückzukehren, wenn ich in einer Woche wieder in den Flieger nach New York steige. Nein, ich reise zurück ins Randgebiet, in die egoistische, utopische Zweisamkeit des Pärchendaseins. Dankeschön.
I'd totally forgotten that I wrote that. Totally new to me, that.
But you remember writing it?
Vaguely, but I haven't read it. So yeah. And God, it's nice to hear you read it. That rhythm in your voice.
How is your grandmother?
Very senile and old, and but fine. She's been kind of the same for many years now. So it was scary in the beginning, like a lot of senility is, panic and paranoia, and then now it's been just stable for years, and she doesn't know where she is, but she's laughing and she's sitting around, and she seems like it looks like her body is being kind to her, so she's fine.
I loved how you describe her like the genius of an octopus. It's just somehow the brain has moved into different parts of the body instead of just being totally focused like we are. So you somehow try to see her still as a human being and not like someone who has a disease. Tell me about the relationship you had to her when you grew up.
Well, it wasn't like medium close, I guess. She was a very kind of a strong matriarch, fixing everything kind of woman, like not a cuddly, but very, very loving in her way. She had lots of grandchildren, so we were all just running around. And then, so I always loved her, but it wasn't that close. But then when she got Alzheimer's, I think maybe because, I mean, she's been senile for as long as I've been an adult. Pretty early in my teens it started happening. I can't even remember now. But it's been like that for a long time, and so I got a closer relationship to the senile version actually, and then I guess we spent more time just me and her and talking, and I would lie in bed with her a lot, and because I was so incredibly amused by the stories too. She was always incredibly funny and very good with language. Both her and my grandfather, everything, it was a whole world built in puns and language. Everything was language, and she was a very proud woman and very pleased with her own mastery of language. So to hear that being kind of contorted by the senility was amazing, because her rhythm was there, her jokes were there, but they came in this kind of random new order, and you never knew what was going to come, and the association, suddenly we were before her time with her grandparents. We would shift scenes, and I could kind of fish out of her where we were, so it was time traveling at the same time, and I could get closer to her. She was, you know, of a generation and of a culture that wasn't, I guess, as sentimental as I am or as cuddly as I am. Suddenly, you know, she would enjoy me rubbing her feet or whatever. So it was a closeness, and then now she's more senile, and I haven't seen her enough last year. But I know she's okay. But you can't pull out the stories like that anymore. So.
You mentioned the language that she speaks, and maybe it's interesting now to tell that Norway has two languages.
Yeah.
Bokmål and nynorsk. Which one is yours?
Good question. I have always written bokmål, which is the mean Danish colonizer. Almost everybody uses that language. And then we have this underdog language, nynorsk, which kind of came out of the 1800s, you know, building a national identity for our own, not the Danish. And then my grandmother's great-grandfather, father's brother, the farm that she grew up on was the farm that the man who kind of put together New Norwegian was from, which is the big pride of and she was very proud of that, and she talks about that a lot in the book. And this New Norwegian I write that too. I work sometimes for a Norwegian newspaper. That's the only national newspaper that's only in New Norwegian. So I write that, but it takes me longer, and I'm really pleased when it works. It's cleaner and neater and more sharp in a way, but then it also can become archaic and too self-conscious. A lot of people who write it sound incredibly self-conscious in their language, and it can get pompous too. So it's a double-edged sword, I would say.
I have a theory about language, that every country, every language has its own word that somehow in one word describes the way the people are. I mean, superficially.
Yeah.
And for example, obviously for the US, it's awesome.
Yeah.
If you understand that word, you understand a huge part of the US.
Yeah.
For example, in Finland, where I come from, it's of course sisu.
What is
That's the power of being silent.
Ah, okay. Nice.
And I think we all know in Austria it's these stupid Bastjo. You immediately understand what the Austrians are doing there. And I wanted to know, what is the Norwegian word that describes the Norwegian culture?
Oof, I don't know if I can answer that. But the traditional answer that a lot of people would give you, which is ridiculous, is the word dugnad. Okay. Which is that everybody contributes to the common together, as if that isn't something that people everywhere has always done. So it doesn't really make sense as a national characteristic. I don't think I can answer that. It's the National Day of Norway today, actually.
It is.
And I'm not there, so I'm a bad patriot. But I don't think I can answer. I mean, all the words popping into my head are mean, and I like Norway now, so it doesn't.
Give us one mean word.
No, I don't know. Traust.
No.
Yeah. Just
How would you describe that?
Kind of. But I don't mean it. It's just a word I said. It means kind of dry and. But it's not true. It's a juicy country.
I would say it's kuslig.
Oh, right. Kuslig. Yeah, there's been written some New Yorker articles about that, I think. It means that things are cozy and it's linked to lighting a lot of candles when you're home and finding like fantastic pleasure in the idea of just sitting home with a blanket. I don't have a kuslig gene in me for it. Like I cannot do that stuff, which is a problem with the intimate relationships.
Another word that could be the word for Norway, if I have to be a little mean, would be olje.
Yeah.
So oil.
Good, precise, descriptive.
How come you wrote this big book without using that word once?
I do use it once.
You do?
Yeah, I do. I do. Or if it's somewhere else, don't I say something? I definitely. I say something about an oil. I do. It's in Omfallosskepsis somewhere about oil, like a relationship to the past that is like an oil pipeline between the past and the future. As a metaphor. But I don't have that much to say about oil, I don't think.
But how does it feel like? Because we Swiss people do know this. It's what it's like to live in a very, very rich country and not really feeling really secure about that. What's it like to live in this super rich country like Norway?
Well, it's not something I think about on a daily basis, but I think like Switzerland, there's the danger of two countries that would maybe be a little bit more charming if it had a little bit less money, right? And that it has kind of Qatar tendencies, and it could go that way. And one thing I've thought about is I'm a little bit. I can imagine that this year, that the year of Corona, where we're now so very much agreed that we shouldn't travel anymore for climate reasons, for all kinds of reasons, but also now that Norwegians have been allowed a year of just koseliness for the people who haven't suffered. It's been a lot of koselig and like insular living. And I guess I have thought about whether this will catapult Norwegian culture into something more like the American disinterest for the rest of the world. And because it's, but I mean, I'm no kind of that kind of cultural critic, so I don't want to make like big statements about a culture, national character and stuff. But the money is great too. I mean, I get funding to write. I mean, that's getting funding to write is a much bigger compliment than a good review can make me happy for 5 minutes, but a good scholarship can make me happy for 6 months. So I'm not gonna. I have mostly a good relationship to Norwegian money, especially when they're poured into culture. But sure, yeah.
All right, the time is almost up, but I would like to open it up if there are 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Now would be the time to ask them.
Thank you very much for the book, and thank you very much for the reading. I really enjoyed it. You've been talking at the beginning of your talk a lot about essays, how you write essays. And maybe it's not an important question because you can enjoy what you have written without labeling it as an essay or anything else. But still, it got me wondering, because when I listened to what you wrote, I would label it as short stories, or maybe true short stories if you have really experienced what you have written. So could you maybe comment on why you chose to label what you have written as an essay?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. Well, it would never be an option to label it as a short story for me, because a short story is fiction, right? That's very closely linked to. I mean, the word, it sets up a completely different contract with the reader, and it's not like I put the label on afterwards. I'm really moving out of the essay tradition, which is which has its certain qualities and its limitations and its possibilities that are different from that of the short story. So I totally see that it can be read like it if it wasn't labeled as it, as some of them at some point, but it would be impossible to call it that. But it's a good question, and actually, especially here, and I noticed, people use genres differently in different places, and I've heard multiple people here refer to it as short stories, which is interesting. So maybe you use the genre slightly differently than we do, but in Norwegian it would be, I don't think that would even seem like a possibility. So maybe you have a broader, looser, more open definition of short stories here, I don't know. But good question.
Is there another question? We have one more. Yes, please.
Can I take this off? First of all, gratulerer med nasjonaldagen.
Tack.
Always Constitution Day. So
Yeah.
2 years ago, I was in Oslo. Great parade.
Really?
Before everything went downhill from there on. My question to you is, I would like to know, why did your book first come out in German as opposed to English, for example, where it would have reached a bigger audience? Not that I'm minded, I speak German as well, but is there a particular reason why this was pitched first in German, and will this be taken forward to other European languages or other world languages?
Good question. I mean, I wish. The English market this is a very common, from what I understand, this is kind of how the book market works. That European countries will often sell to each other before the English market takes it. So the English market is the hardest. But so I mean, I'm not doing this stuff. My agent is doing that stuff. So, I mean, there hasn't been any offers. It's that easily, and it's that easy, and it's a slow market, the English market. So often, books in translation will come many, many years after. But I hope that happens.
Okay, unfortunately, I think we have to wrap it up now. Thank you so much for coming here. Tack så mycket, Ida.
Tusen tack, Mikael.
And thank you, Ariela.
Yeah.
It was nice to see you all.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.